In this video, I will offer reasons why it is time to have a new Constitution. I will show how the current Constitution is flawed. First, people should stop worshiping the current United States Constitution. It was not written by gods, but by humans with imperfect knowledge, who lived 23 decades ago, humans who were smart and enlightened, but who did not know everything, and who could not have foreseen the rapid technological advances of the last few centuries. By the term Constitution, I mean the 1787 document, plus amendments and interpretations throughout the years, which forms an underlying set of core laws that define the United States political structure. A constitution is an important foundational framework beneath the laws which are not worthy of worship or unquestioned allegiance. Blind adhesion to the Constitution prevents us from examining it critically. A Constitution should serve our needs, but the current Constitution does not do this. Whether we're liberal or conservative or Democrat or Republican, the American political system is not working for us. I argue that the current Constitution is the cause of our problems, and I say, let's fix it. A simple way to think about our situation is as follows. There's the Constitution, which is like deep law. It is like the operating system of a computer or the foundation of a house. Then there are laws and rulings based on the Constitution, which are like surface law. These are like application programs on a computer or the walls and rooms of a house. And last, there are politicians in office. That's a simplified way to look at our political structure. When people are unhappy, they may blame politicians, or they may blame surface laws, but they don't blame the deep law which they hold as perfect. Why is this? Politicians change regularly, but still people are unhappy. Surface laws change too from time to time, but still people are unhappy. Why are the deep laws held as flawless? The deep laws undergird the entire political structure. While it should not be changed for spurious reasons, when politics becomes seriously dysfunctional, as it is at present, it is time to revamp the deep law and write a new Constitution. A big flaw with the current Constitution is that it pushes people away from politics. We, the people, are supposed to run the country, but instead, we, the people, are disconnected and apathetic consumers with little clout, and the Constitution is largely to blame for this. Since 1787, numerous democracies have come into existence, and it is possible to compare their constitutions with ours. Few nations have modeled their constitutions after ours, but more have chosen multi-party systems based on a parliamentary arrangement, and these nations are better governed with fairer taxes, health care which is better yet less expensive, more freedom, better job opportunities, quality education, and lower rates of incarceration. If we examine constitutions of well-run democracies, we can derive a set of 5 core principles of good government. First, majority rule. Second, one person, one vote. Third, representative government. Fourth, competitive elections. Fifth, national self-determination. I believe people will agree that these are good principles. They enable good government, but if we look closely, the U.S. Constitution often violates these principles. Consider the two-party system. Since the Constitution failed to specify election rules, almost all state governments adopted the first-past-the-post winner-take-all system, which eliminates third parties and forces voters to choose a Democrat or Republican. As a result, there are no third-party representatives in office. None. Only Democrats or Republicans. At the store, there are dozens of brands of soda. In politics, only Coke or Pepsi. Our political choices are limited to two mainstream parties. This is exclusionary. Folks who prefer Sprite or Dr. Pepper or Snapple have no voice in government. The two-party system stifles debate. It violates the principle of representative government because there are only two choices. The two-party system polarizes the public and locks the parties in seemingly endless partisan battling in which nothing substantive seems to get done. Consider the Electoral College. In past presidential elections, 4 times now, it chose somebody other than the winner of the popular vote. This violates majority rule. In the 2016 election, 3 million more people voted for Clinton, but instead Trump won because of this obscure system. Consider the Senate. Since every state has 2 senators, small states such as Wyoming have as much clout as big states as California. So the people of Wyoming have disproportionate power in the Senate. This violates one person, one vote. Consider gerrymandering. The Constitution allows it, so the party in power can artificially extend its power by creatively redrawing maps. It gives incumbents an unfair advantage. This violates competitive elections. Consider presidential primaries. The Constitution fails to specify how presidential primaries should happen. States such as Iowa and New Hampshire have early primaries, so voters in these states have disproportionately greater power in choosing presidential candidates. This violates one person, one vote. Further, the haphazard schedule of state-selected primaries requires candidates to crisscross the nation in an exhausting travel schedule. Consider foreign policy. Back in 1787, the framers divided power among the branches of government to prevent tyranny, which is good, but it also weakens foreign policy, which is not good. While Congress declares war and the Senate ratifies treaties, the President has the most authority by managing overall diplomacy and strategy. But presidents must leave office after 8 years, sometimes after 4, which hobbles long-term planning and makes it hard to keep long-term commitments to allies. The Constitution does not require the President to have had any military or diplomatic experience, so the Commander-in-Chief is often learning on the job. This inexperience can lead to blunders like the Vietnam War and the Second War in Iraq. Further, the President is the head of a political party, so foreign policy is often distorted by partisanship. Foreign policy should be what is best for the nation as a whole, but we often have a pro-business Republican foreign policy or a pro-labor Democratic foreign policy. We do not have an American foreign policy. We elect presidents who we hope will magically set aside their partisan leanings upon taking office, but there are numerous examples of this not happening, such as when George W. Bush's staff outed CIA agent Valerie Plame because of partisan politics. The FBI and CIA believe the last election in 2016 was manipulated by a foreign dictator for partisan purposes. Partisanship enables foreign powers to play us. This violates national self-determination. Overall, U.S. foreign policy is flawed and mediocre, often run by amateurs, unable to adhere to long-term plans, leading to senseless wars and the coddling of foreign dictators. And these are all constitutional flaws. Examine the presidency. It is overburdened with 3 tough tasks: being the head of government, being the head of a political party, and being the head of foreign policy. This is too much responsibility for one person. If there's a domestic scandal involving the president, This can sabotage the foreign policy effort. Consider federalism. The nation began with a federal system which gave state governments wide latitude to regulate their respective economies. So for people, there were two power centers, state governments and the federal government. Since state governments are physically closer to their citizens, they are more likely to regulate wisely within their borders. If a citizen becomes dissatisfied with a particular state's choices, then he or she can move to a better regulated state. And this competition between states to attract voters and businesses can give citizens much freedom. Further, the federal arrangement unites the states under a strong national umbrella for defense. This is a sensible arrangement. Unfortunately, over time, the federal system has been corrupted. Since some states seceded in the Civil War, the idea of states' rights lost some credibility. In 1913, the 17th Amendment specified that senators would no longer be chosen by state legislatures, but by popular vote, which weakened the power of state governments in the national government. The Supreme Court often interpreted the Commerce Clause of the Constitution to allow for sweeping interstate regulations, with the result being that Washington is awash in a slew of regulatory agencies and runs much of the domestic economy clumsily. In sum, the Constitution has failed to keep the federal arrangement intact. The framers permitted constitutional amendments, but made the process extremely difficult to do. Accordingly, while there have been approximately 11,000 amendments proposed, only 17 have been ratified, not counting the 10 original Bill of Rights amendments. Some amendments have been sensible, such as outlawing slavery and expanding citizenship, while other amendments have been counterproductive, such as prohibiting alcohol. A big problem is that the political system is unable to reform itself. When amendments do happen, they usually deal with one issue or problem rather than confronting the structure of the Constitution as a whole. It is like being stuck with the chassis of a car built in 1787, in which only the headlights are replaced or a gas-powered engine is added, without integrating these new technologies into a coherent whole. Further, much of the authority to enact amendments rests with in-office politicians who by nature are reluctant to enact substantive reform. Congresspersons, for example, won't enact term limits because they want to be reelected. Over time, politicians have rigged the election rules to cripple potential challengers. One method is gerrymandering, in which elected officials redraw their congressional districts for partisan advantage. Gerrymandering has been criticized since the early 1800s, but while this corruption has been known and criticized for 2 centuries, nothing has happened. Again, because elected officials don't want competitive elections. Incumbents have a 6-to-1 advantage in raising campaign cash, and they voted themselves to have free mailings. So the rules are rigged. Congresspersons seeking re-election have a 90% chance of winning re-election. If elections were fair, the chance of re-election should be only 50%. This violates competitive elections. The Constitution is at fault here because it does not specify that elections must be fair. The negative consequence is that congresspersons do not have to listen to voters, but rather can use and abuse their positions for personal enrichment. Most congresspersons are multimillionaires. Some congresspersons have been in office for decades. But the most serious constitutional flaw is that it pushes Americans away from politics. Today, Americans are disconnected from the political sphere. We are generally clueless about what happens in Washington. Only half of us bother to vote every 4 years. Is this the Constitution's fault? Of course. The Constitution should require voting, and it should require citizens to meet with representatives regularly. It does not do this. As a result, we the people are not real citizens. We are consumers with passports, but we have no political power, and this is dangerous. The initial 1787 Constitution did not even use the word citizen, not once. And the current Constitution does not specify what citizenship means. The disconnect between the people and representatives is at the heart of much of the mess. The current Constitution is dysfunctional, and current politicians cannot be trusted to reform it. So it is not a good idea to have a constitutional convention if corrupt public officials rewrite it. They could only make it worse. Therefore, rewriting the Constitution is something that we the people must do. Accordingly, as a member of the public, I wrote a replacement Constitution which keeps the good parts and fixes the flaws. My proposed Constitution has many positive features: a multi-party parliamentary system. Foreign policy is nonpartisan and long-term focused. Competitive elections. Term limits for congresspersons and Supreme Court justices. Rotation of offices. Federalism is restored. Checks and balances are kept. One person, one vote. Citizenship is defined to require participation and voting. No gerrymandering. A sensible primary system. My Constitution enables a solution to the problem of terrorism. The current one does not. I propose my Constitution in my book, Common Sense 2, which is available on Amazon and Kindle. Thank you for listening.